They say your life can change in an instant, but I didn't expect mine to fall apart on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee, still shaking off the morning grogginess, while Sherry, my wife, darted around the kitchen, throwing together her usual avocado toast. She always had this energy in the morning, a bounce in her step that contrasted my slow, deliberate routine. The woman could juggle 3 things at once without breaking a sweat. Watching her now, you wouldn't think we'd been married for 13 years. She still had that spark that lit up any room she walked into. I smiled at her as she brushed past me to grab the car keys. She smelled of vanilla and something floral, the same perfume she'd worn on our first date. "Big meeting today?" I asked, trying to keep things casual. She laughed, throwing her purse over her shoulder. "Yeah, one of those client presentations that'll either make or break our quarter. Don't wait up for me tonight. Okay? We're celebrating if it goes well." "Got it," I replied, leaning in for a kiss. She brushed her lips against mine, quick and familiar, before heading out the door. I watched her drive off, my gaze lingering as her car turned the corner and disappeared from view. There was nothing unusual about the morning. Everything felt normal, and maybe that was the most deceptive part of it all. After finishing my coffee, I headed to the home office. I worked in tech, managing remote teams from home while Sherry built her real estate empire. Her job often kept her out late. Showings, meetings, networking events, but I never minded. We had a good balance, or at least I thought we did. By noon, I'd wrapped up a few meetings and was scrolling through emails when a social media notification popped up on my phone, tagged in a photo by Greg Allen. My eyebrows furrowed. Greg was Sherry's boss, the man who'd personally helped her land some of her biggest deals. I clicked on the notification, expecting a group shot from an office celebration or a work lunch. Instead, I saw a picture that made my stomach drop. There was Sherry, sitting at an upscale bar, laughing at something off camera. She had a cocktail in hand, her face glowing under the dim lights. Next to her, Greg leaned in closer than any boss should. It wasn't just the way he looked at her. It was the way her body subtly tilted toward him, as if pulled by some invisible force. My mind raced. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe this was just one of those harmless work outings that people overanalyze. But when I zoomed in, I noticed something that made my pulse quicken. The watch on her wrist. It wasn't hers, it was mine. I'd bought it for her as an anniversary gift last year, and she never wore it to work. She told me it felt too special to risk damaging during her daily hustle. Yet here she was, flaunting it like a statement piece. I closed the app and tried to shake off the gnawing feeling in my gut. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the pieces were stacking up in a way I couldn't ignore. Something wasn't adding up, and I needed answers. Later that evening, I texted Sherry. "Hope your presentation went well. How's the celebration going?" Her reply came back almost instantly. "Going great. Don't wait up. Love you." I stared at the message, rereading the words as if they held some hidden meaning. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to ask more, but I decided against it. I play it cool for now. Instead, I opened my laptop and started digging. It began with her calendar, which she always synced to our shared account. Then her recent transactions, her work emails, her travel itineraries. The deeper I went, the more inconsistencies I found. Meetings that didn't exist, charges from restaurants we'd never visited, hotel stays under the guise of work trips. By the time I closed the laptop, the house was silent, and my head was spinning. I poured myself a whiskey and sat on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. I didn't know exactly what I was dealing with yet, but one thing was clear. Sherry had secrets, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to uncover them all. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache. Not from the whiskey, but from the war raging inside my head. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the social media post was innocent, and the hotel stays were just a part of her job. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. As Sherry hummed to herself in the bathroom, the scent of her floral perfume wafting through the door, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced through memories, her late nights, Her excuses about last-minute meetings, the way she'd been more distant recently. I hated the doubts creeping in, but they were relentless. When she came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her hair still damp, she flashed me a warm smile. "Morning, babe. You okay? You look like you barely slept." "Just a headache," I mumbled. She crossed the room and leaned down to kiss my forehead. "You've been working too hard. Take it easy today, okay?" I watched her as she dressed, slipping into a fitted navy dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. She added a gold necklace, minimal makeup, and a pair of nude heels. The look was polished, professional, but there was something different about it. She looked too perfect. "You meeting a client today?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, a big one," she replied without looking at me, fiddling with the clasp of her necklace. "Greg and I are showing him a few properties. It could be a huge deal." "Of course, Greg." I forced a smile. "Good luck." "Thanks, babe. I'll text you when it's done." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, her heels clicking softly against the floor. A second later, I heard the front door shut, and then silence. I sat up, rubbing my temples. I couldn't go another day like this, second-guessing every word she said. I needed proof one way or the other. By noon, I was parked in a lot across from her office building, a takeout coffee in hand and my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I had already done a quick search online and found a tracking app that could be installed on her phone. If she wasn't hiding anything, I'd never need to use it. But if she was, I checked my watch. It was almost lunchtime, the perfect time to make my move. Sherry's car was parked exactly where I expected it to be, in the employee lot behind the building. I walked inside the cafe next door and ordered a sandwich, pretending to eat as I watched the entrance. About 20 minutes later, I saw her walk out, laughing, her phone in hand. She didn't notice me as she turned the corner, heading down the street toward the nearby deli. Perfect. I ditched my sandwich and followed her car back to her office lot. The parking area was practically empty except for a few scattered vehicles. My palms were sweaty, my pulse racing as I approached her car. It wasn't locked. She was always careless about that. I slid into the driver's seat and quickly pulled out her phone from the center console, my fingers moving faster than my brain. I had practiced this last night, watching tutorial videos on how to install the app in under 2 minutes. With trembling hands, I opened her phone, entered the passcode, our wedding anniversary. She hadn't bothered to change it, and downloaded the app. 1 minute and 30 seconds later, I was out of the car and back in mine, pretending to check my emails as the app synced to my phone. Once it was connected, I'd be able to see her messages, calls, and location in real time. My stomach churned with guilt, but it was drowned out by the need to know the truth. Back at home, I opened the tracking app on my laptop. The interface was simple, an interactive map showing her current location and tabs for messages, emails, and call logs. I clicked on Messages, half expecting to find nothing. But within seconds, a text thread appeared. "Greg Allen. Can't wait to see you tonight. Should I get the usual room?" Winking face. "Sherry. You're insatiable. You know that? But yes, same place. 8 p.m. Greg Allen, we make a good team, in and out of the office. Sherry. Don't be late." My breath hitched. The words blurred in front of my eyes, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The messages continued, but I couldn't read any more. My hands shook as I slammed the laptop shut and sat there, staring at the wall. Every part of me wanted to scream, to punch a hole through the drywall, to call her and demand an explanation. But instead, I sat frozen, trapped between disbelief and rage. I didn't need to check the location tab. I already knew where she'd be tonight. The only question left was whether I had the guts to confront her. I spent the rest of the day pacing the living room, running through every possible scenario. What if I confronted her and she denied it? What if she gaslit me, made me feel like the crazy one for digging through her phone? Or worse, what if she didn't deny it at all and just confirmed what I was dreading? By the time the clock hit 7 p.m., I knew there was no turning back. I had to see it for myself. I wasn't about to let her twist this into some misunderstanding over texts. No, I needed cold, hard proof. I threw on a black hoodie and jeans, grabbed my car keys, and headed out into the crisp evening air. The sound of my sneakers hitting the pavement felt deafening as I walked to my car, but I ignored it. Tonight wasn't about second-guessing myself. The hotel wasn't far, just a 15-minute drive. Too close for comfort, honestly. My mind wandered as I drove, replaying scenes from our life together like a highlight reel on loop. Our wedding day, when she cried so hard during her vows that the pastor had to pause for her to compose herself. The time we adopted our rescue dog, Max, and she couldn't stop kissing his face in the back seat on the way home. The nights we spent on the couch, binge-watching crime dramas and laughing over which one of us would make the worst detective. How the hell did we get here? I pulled into the parking lot of the Windsor Suites, killing the headlights as I parked near the back where it was darker. It wasn't the type of hotel where you'd take a family vacation or plan a romantic getaway. It was convenient. I checked the time. 7:48 p.m. Her message said 8. I had a few minutes to steel myself. I leaned back in the driver's seat, trying to calm my racing heart, but the adrenaline wouldn't quit. Every beat felt like a countdown to detonation. Before I could talk myself out of it, I slipped out of the car and walked toward the entrance. The lobby was dimly lit, with fake plants and a bored-looking receptionist scrolling on her phone behind the desk. She barely looked up as I passed by, heading straight for the elevator bank like I knew where I was going. Thanks to the tracking app, I did. Room 312. As the elevator climbed, my mind filled with what I might see. Were they already up there, tangled together on the bed I'd once trusted her in? Was she laughing at something Greg said, the same way she used to laugh at my dumb jokes? The elevator dinged, and I stepped out onto the third floor. The hallway stretched in both directions, eerily quiet except for the faint hum of the vending machine at the end of the corridor. I followed the room numbers until I stood in front of 312. This was it. My hand hovered over the door, debating whether to knock or just bust in. But before I could decide, muffled voices leaked through the door. Hers. His. They weren't loud, but I could hear just enough to know they weren't discussing real estate deals. My pulse thundered in my ears as I pressed my ear against the door, hoping to catch any details that could make this hurt less. Instead, I heard her laugh. That laugh. The one that used to be mine. I backed away from the door, my breath hitching. The air felt like it was being sucked out of the hallway, and I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. My phone buzzed in my pocket, jolting me back to reality. I pulled it out and saw her name on the screen. Sherry. Don't wait up, babe. I might be out late. The audacity. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stuffed the phone back into my pocket. I wasn't waiting up. I was here, right outside the room where she thought she could hide this. I needed proof. My hands trembled as I pulled out the digital recorder I had tucked in my hoodie pocket, my fingers fumbling to turn it on. I set it near the base of the door, recording everything happening inside. Then, I did something I hadn't planned. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the room number. Part of me wanted to burst through the door right then, but something told me to wait, to be smarter. There was a bigger picture here, and I had to make sure I could destroy her lies without any loopholes. 15 minutes passed. 20. The recorder captured snippets of moans and whispers that made my stomach twist into knots. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white, but I refused to break down here. Not in this hallway. Then the door opened. I barely had time to duck behind a corner before Greg stepped out, straightening his tie and grinning like a man who just won the lottery. He whistled as he headed for the elevator, leaving the door slightly ajar behind him. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I didn't hesitate. I slipped inside the room. Sherry was still lying on the bed, tangled in the sheets, her hair tousled like she'd just run a marathon. When she saw me, her eyes widened, and for a split second, there was no denying what I saw in them. Fear. Jack? She gasped, clutching the sheets to her chest. What the hell? What are you doing here? I didn't answer. Couldn't. My chest felt like it was caving in. I looked around the room, the rumpled sheets, the half-empty champagne bottle on the nightstand, the pair of men's cufflinks on the dresser. All the proof I'd ever need. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice trembling. "No," I replied, my voice calm but ice-cold. "But neither are you." Her face paled, and I knew in that moment that she understood exactly what I meant. There was no turning back now. The storm had officially broken. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She just sat there, clutching the sheets like they could somehow shield her from the wreckage. My hands trembled, but not from fear. The rage simmering under my skin was barely contained, and it was taking every ounce of self-control not to scream at her. I took a step forward, my eyes locked on hers. "How long, Sherry?" She blinked rapidly, as if the tears she was holding back would drown her if they spilled. "Jack, please." "How long?" I repeated, my voice steady, but venom dripped from every word. Her gaze darted to the floor, then back to me. "6 months?" she whispered, as if saying it softly would make it hurt less. 6 months. 6 fucking months. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and unfamiliar even to my own ears. "Wow, that long? Huh? While I was sitting at home waiting for you, thinking you were working late, you were here. With him. Jack, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't insult me with that cliché. I heard you. I saw you. I know what's been going on. There's no way to spin this." I gestured toward the bed, the sheets tangled in betrayal. "Do you even love me anymore?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. She didn't answer right away, and that pause was louder than any confession she could have made. I felt something crack inside me, something that couldn't be fixed. "Jack," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face.
I'm sorry.
"I didn't mean for it to happen." "Oh, that makes it better." I laughed again, pacing the room. "You didn't mean for it to happen. What? You just accidentally ended up in bed with your boss every few nights." She sobbed harder, her hands shaking as she tried to wipe her face. "Please, let me explain." "You had 6 months to explain," I spat. "But you didn't. You chose to lie, to come home and kiss me with the same mouth you used to tell him how much you wanted him." My voice cracked, but I kept going. "Was it worth it, Sherry? Was he worth destroying everything we built together?" Her silence told me everything I needed to know. I walked to the dresser, grabbed the cufflinks, and held them up. "These his?" She nodded weakly. Without a second thought, I hurled them across the room, watching them bounce off the wall and land near the nightstand. The anger was suffocating now, clouding my thoughts. I needed to get out of there before I said or did something I'd regret. "You can stay here tonight," I said coldly. "I'm going home. Don't bother coming back until you've figured out how to be honest for once in your life." "Jack, please, don't leave like this." I paused at the door, my hand resting on the handle. "Oh, I'm leaving, all right. But this is just the beginning. You're going to see exactly what happens when you play me for a fool." I walked out before she could respond, the sound of her sobs following me down the hallway. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap in half. The city lights blurred together, and for a moment, I considered just driving until I hit the ocean. But I couldn't run. Not yet. When I pulled into the driveway, the house felt foreign. It wasn't home anymore. It was a monument to a life that no longer existed. I walked inside, slamming the door behind me, and tossed my keys on the counter. Max, our golden retriever, trotted over, wagging his tail, blissfully unaware of the shitstorm that had just erupted. I knelt down, burying my face in his fur as the first sob ripped through me. I didn't want to cry. I wanted to be strong, to bottle it all up and use it as fuel to burn this whole situation to the ground. But the weight of it all crushed me. I cried for what felt like hours, sitting there on the kitchen floor with Max's head resting on my knee. When the tears finally stopped, I stood up, wiped my face, and grabbed a glass of water. My phone buzzed on the counter, and my heart sank when I saw her name light up the screen. I let it ring. Then, a text came through. "Sherry, I know you hate me, but please come home so we can talk. I chuckled darkly and replied, I am home. You're not welcome here anymore. She didn't reply after that. I spent the rest of the night gathering evidence, the texts, the call logs, the recording I'd taken at the hotel. I forwarded everything to my email and backed it up to a flash drive. I wasn't sure what my next move was, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going down without a fight. Around 3 a.m., I finally collapsed on the couch, staring at the ceiling until sleep took me. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating. It was my best friend, Mike. I hadn't told anyone yet, but he could always sense when something was wrong. "Hey man," I said, my voice hoarse. "Jack? You sound like shit. Everything okay?" I hesitated, but then the dam broke. I told him everything about the texts, the hotel, the confrontation. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "Jesus," Mike finally said. "I'm so sorry, man." "Yeah," I muttered. "Me too. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm not letting her walk away from this unscathed." Mike sighed. "You need anything, you call me. Don't do anything crazy. Okay? Thanks. I'll be fine." But as I hung up the phone, I wasn't sure if that was true. All I knew was that the life I had built was in shambles, and I was going to make sure she felt every piece of it crumble. By noon, I was sitting in a diner, nursing a coffee that had long gone cold. The scent of grease and bacon filled the air, but I wasn't hungry. My stomach had been in knots since I left the house, and no amount of food was going to settle it. I stared blankly at the window, watching cars pass by on the busy street outside, but all I could see was her face. The shock, the guilt, the fear. The doorbell jingled, and Mike slid into the booth across from me, setting his keys and sunglasses on the table. He gave me a once-over and whistled. "Man, you look like you've been through hell." I smirked bitterly. "I'm still in it." A waitress appeared, and Mike ordered a burger and fries. Once she left, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. "So, what's the plan, Jack? You going for a divorce, or something more dramatic?" I rubbed my temples. "I don't know. Part of me wants to burn it all down. The house, her stuff, everything." "I get it," Mike said. "But you've got to be smart about this. You have the proof, right?" I nodded. "Texts, call logs, recordings. I even have a picture of the hotel room." Mike grinned. "Good. That's leverage. Don't waste it by doing something you'll regret." His words sank in, grounding me just enough to think clearly. I needed to stop letting my emotions control me. Sherry had already blindsided me once. I wasn't going to let her do it again. Just as I was about to thank him, my phone buzzed. I expected it to be Sherry, but instead, it was a notification from the tracking app. My breath hitched when I saw her location. Greg's house. I clenched my jaw. Of course, she'd run straight to him. Mike noticed the change in my expression. "What is it?" "She's at his place," I said, barely able to keep the anger out of my voice. Mike leaned back, crossing his arms. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that it's time to send a message." 20 minutes later, I was parked across the street from Greg's house. It was a sleek, modern home in one of the city's more upscale neighborhoods, with a pristine lawn and a driveway that probably cost more than my car. I couldn't help but wonder how many other affairs had been hidden behind those glass walls. I stayed in the car for a while, debating my next move. Storming in and causing a scene was tempting, but Mike's voice echoed in my head. "Be smart." I didn't need to confront them right now. I needed to let them think they were safe, that I was licking my wounds at home while they played house. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the pictures I had taken at the hotel. One in particular stood out. Sherry lying in bed, her hair a mess, her makeup smeared, with Greg's cufflinks on the nightstand beside her. My fingers hovered over the share button. Instead of sending it to anyone, I uploaded it to a hidden cloud folder labeled The Fallout. If this went to court, I'd have more than enough to prove her infidelity. But for now, I needed to hit her where it hurt without blowing up my leverage. I dialed a number I never thought I'd call. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered. "Hi, is this Cynthia Allen?" I asked. Yes. Who's calling? I swallowed hard. My name's Jack Meyer. I'm the husband of one of Greg's employees, Sherry. There was a brief pause, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Okay, what is this about? I exhaled, trying to keep my composure. I think you deserve to know what your husband's been up to. I could hear her breathing quicken on the other end. Are you serious? I'm dead serious, I said. I have proof. Pictures, texts, everything. If you want to see it, I can send it to you. Silence hung between us before she whispered, Send it. I hesitated for a moment, knowing this would set off a chain reaction that I couldn't undo. But then I thought of the months of lies, the betrayal, the way Sherry looked me in the eye and told me she loved me while sleeping with someone else. I hit send. I was halfway home when my phone buzzed again. This time it was Cynthia. I pulled over to the side of the road and answered. I got the pictures, she said, her voice shaking. Thank you for telling me. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but thank you. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. I know how much this sucks. I'll take care of Greg, she said, her tone hardening. You take care of Sherry. We hung up, and I sat there for a moment, letting the weight of what I had just done settle over me. There was no going back now. When I got home, I found Sherry's car parked in the driveway. My pulse quickened as I opened the front door and stepped inside. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and tear-streaked, with her phone clutched in her hands. You talked to Cynthia, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I dropped my keys on the counter and crossed my arms. Yep. Her breath hitched. Jack, you didn't have to. Yes, I did, I said, cutting her off. She deserved to know, just like I did. Sherry stood up, her hands trembling. We can fix this. Please, Jack, I'll do anything, counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. Just don't end us like this. I shook my head, my voice cold and steady. You ended us the moment you decided he was worth more than me. Her sobs filled the room as I turned and walked upstairs. I didn't slam the door, didn't yell, didn't say anything else. The damage was done, and the message was sent. Now, it was just a matter of waiting to see how the rest of the pieces would fall. The next morning, the house was suffocating. Sherry's cries had stopped sometime during the night, but the air still felt thick with tension. I woke up with a headache, my mind pounding as if it had run a marathon in my sleep. As I got dressed, I could hear the faint clink of dishes downstairs. She was in the kitchen, probably trying to pretend everything was normal. It wasn't. By the time I made my way down, she was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, her eyes swollen and bloodshot. She looked up at me, hope flickering briefly across her face, but I ignored it and headed straight for the coffee pot. Jack, can we please talk? I didn't turn around. We talked last night. That wasn't talking, she whispered. You were angry and I get it. But can we try again? Please. I poured the coffee, took a sip, and finally turned to face her. You think there's anything left to say? She wiped at her eyes, her fingers trembling. I was wrong. I was stupid. I know that. But I love you. I've always loved you. I made a mistake, but it doesn't have to end like this. I laughed bitterly. A mistake? A 6-month affair with your boss isn't a mistake, Sherry. It's a calculated betrayal. Every lie you told me, every time you came home and kissed me after being with him, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. I was done protecting her from the truth. Do you know what's funny? I asked, my voice calm but lethal. I spent months wondering if it was me, if I wasn't enough, if I didn't love you the right way, or give you the attention you needed. But you know what I realized last night? She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I was enough, I said. You just didn't care. Her sobs intensified, but I kept going. I could have given you everything, and you still would have chosen him. Because this isn't about what I did or didn't do. It's about you. You wanted excitement. You wanted danger. Well, congratulations. You got it. I grabbed my keys off the counter, ready to leave before her tears chipped away at what little resolve I had left. But just as I reached the door, There was a knock. I froze. Sherry's breath hitched, and her eyes widened with panic. Slowly, I opened the door, and there he was, Greg Allen. The bastard had the nerve to show up at my house, his hands in his pockets, looking like he'd just stepped off a yacht. His suit was perfectly pressed, his hair slicked back like this was just another business deal. "What the hell are you doing here?" I growled. "Jack, I just want to talk," he said smoothly, like he was trying to sell me a new condo. "I think we can handle this like adults." "Adults?" I laughed, stepping outside and slamming the door behind me. "You've been screwing my wife for 6 months, and now you want to play the adult card?" He held up his hands as if surrendering. "Look, I get that you're angry." "No," I said, cutting him off. "You don't get it. You don't get how it feels to be blindsided by the person you trusted the most. You don't get what it's like to have your life ripped apart overnight because two selfish assholes couldn't keep their hands off each other." Greg shifted uncomfortably, but I wasn't done. "You think you're just going to walk away from this with your reputation intact? You think I'm going to roll over and let you ruin my life without consequences?" He cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Jack, listen." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You listen. I've already sent everything to your wife. The pictures, the texts, the hotel receipts, she knows it all. So if you're here to beg me to keep quiet, you're wasting your time." His confident demeanor cracked, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "Cynthia knows?" "Oh, she knows," I said, smirking. "And judging by the look on your face, I'm guessing your marriage isn't as bulletproof as you thought." He ran a hand through his hair, muttering something under his breath. "Jack, please. There's no need to make this worse. We can fix this." I laughed, shaking my head. "We? There's no we here. The only thing you and I are fixing is how quickly you're going to pack up your shit and leave my wife's life forever." The door behind me creaked open, and Sherry stepped onto the porch, her face pale. "Greg, go," she whispered, her voice broken. "Please just go." For a moment, he looked like he was going to argue, but then he saw the tears streaming down her face and nodded. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his car, his head hanging lower than when he arrived. When he drove off, the weight of what just happened settled over me like a thick fog. I turned to Sherry, her tear-streaked face a mirror of the pain inside me. "I'm filing for divorce," I said quietly. She sobbed, clutching my arm. "Jack, don't, please. We can go to therapy. I'll quit my job. I'll do anything you want. Just don't give up on us." I pulled my arm away, my voice cold and final. "You gave up on us the moment you let him into our bed. There's nothing left to save." I walked inside, leaving her on the porch as the door shut behind me. The house was silent, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of endings, of broken promises and shattered trust. I knew the next few weeks would be a legal nightmare, but for the first time since this mess began, I felt something close to relief. It was over, or at least it would be soon. I signed the divorce papers 2 weeks later. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches or last-minute pleas. Just two people sitting across from each other in a lawyer's office, signing away the life they'd built together. Sherry cried quietly as she handed over the final document, her fingers trembling. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. When it was over, I walked out without saying goodbye. The next morning, I woke up in my new apartment, a small, one-bedroom place downtown. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No ghosts of a failed marriage hiding in the corners. No reminders of the betrayal that had ripped my life apart. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the city wake up. The air smelled like possibility, like the promise of something better. For the first time in months, the weight on my chest felt lighter. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Mike. "How's the new place, man?" I smiled. "Better." I set the phone down and took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. The pain wasn't gone, and it wouldn't be for a while. But it wasn't the kind of pain that would consume me anymore. It was the kind that would remind me of what I'd survived, and what I'd never let happen again. Somewhere out there, Sherry and Greg were probably dealing with the fallout. I didn't care. Let them deal with the mess they created. As for me, I was moving on.